What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you some of my favorite reviews that I've done so far this year. I was actually counting up all the reviews I've done before I did this video for the year, actually, and that number is already at 25, if you can believe that. And if you can't believe it, I guess you can go look at the videos and see for yourself. Now, that number does, of course, include a lot of older titles, as I just like to play and review games pretty much across the board. And given the fact that the rest of the year is going to be a bit slower in terms of video games, especially with the recent delay of Starfield and Redfall, though to be fair, I don't think that delay caught too many people off guard, even if it is a bit disappointing. So the rest of the year will likely also be filled with older titles as well, but let's go through the 5 games that I enjoyed reviewing the most so far this year. Now, starting off with the obvious one, because let's be real, everybody watching this video knew very well it was going to be on the list, and that is, of course, Elden Ring. I had a lot of fun with Elden Ring. In fact, I was among the first wave of people to 100% this thing. I absolutely no-lifed this game for like a week and a half after its release to get that done. And it's a review I'm pretty proud of, and while there are certainly a rough edge here or there, overall Elden Ring was a fantastic game that I enjoyed a great deal. Mostly, though, I enjoyed the exploration and the world building, and while a central focal point is of course the combat that From Software is known for, which I, broadly speaking, enjoyed as well. But nonetheless, my favorite part of the game was actually just going and looking at all the crazy things you could see, as Elden Ring has a lot of really fantastic environments and areas to explore. But moving on from there, next up on the list we have Expeditions Rome. Now this one actually surprised me because I was expecting a TRPG, and while it certainly is one, it also fantastically blends in a great story that makes it feel more like a CRPG at the same time. Now, Expeditions Rome kind of sees you act as a stand-in for Julius Caesar, and you'll kind of take part in some of the war campaigns that he famously engaged in. And while I personally do enjoy a really good TRPG, I'm a big fan of that style of combat in games, Expeditions Rome really blew me away with the quality of what it was trying to do. The combat is remarkably engaging for something that was essentially real-life soldiers, etc., so I was surprised how well they actually managed to make that combat interesting. Combined with, again, a story full of choices and options. Do you follow in the footsteps of what Julius Caesar actually did, or do you forge your own path through these crises? And of all the games on this list, Expeditions Rome really knocked my expectations out of the park. Now, third on the list, we have Shadowrun Dragonfall. The Shadowrun series, as someone who plays a lot of CRPGs, came highly recommended, and earlier this year, I finally got around to checking it out. And while I would say Shadowrun Hong Kong probably plays the best, Dragonfall, I think, has the best overall story and characters. But what I enjoyed most about Dragonfall in particular was the characters, actually, the companions that you could run around with. They have some really remarkable stories to tell, and they all get their own little personal side missions, and it's just a fantastic experience with some well-told characters, even for a sci-fi fantasy setting like Shadowrun. Fourth on our list, we have Weird West. Weird West is sort of the occult meets the Wild West of the American West. I enjoyed this game a lot. It is a sort of isometric immersive sim, and while the sort of anthology nature of the storytelling in this particular game can lead to some kind of disconnect between you and the story until like the very end of the game, the actual minute-to-minute combat and gameplay of this game were a lot of fun. And while this particular game had a few more rough edges than some of the other games that I've reviewed this year, certainly like the stealth system and the immersive sim part of like hiding bodies, etc., I recall just didn't really work. But nonetheless, very fun game that I enjoyed a great deal in spite of those things. And this is a game that if they decide to put out some DLC for it or add anything to the base game, I would very much so check it out. I loved the entire vibe of this game, and it was a real blast to play. Last on the list, we have the most recent one in terms of this list that I reviewed, and that was Dragon's Dogma. Now, Dragon's Dogma is a far from perfect game. I think there are a lot of things the game just blatantly doesn't tell you that have consequences that you don't find out about until it's way too late. In some ways, that can absolutely detract from your experience. For instance, the game kind of forces you into a romance while simultaneously not explaining the system at all, meaning that a lot of characters actually wind up romancing like the blacksmith or the innkeeper because that's the character they talk to the most, which means a secret metric behind the scenes was actually higher for those characters, so the game just forces you into a romance with them. So there's a lot of silly mechanics like that I just don't think really worked, but the best part of Dragon's Dogma is really the combat and the fighting of giant enemies, etc. It's a lot of fun to kind of navigate those, because while you can kill the smaller enemies basically just hack and slash, the large enemies take a little more care. And overall, it was a really cool experience. But my probably favorite thing about that game was actually the pawn system. So rather than normal companions, you make your own pawn, which serves as your companion, which by itself is kind of whatever, but they actually added a bunch of extra layers to it where your pawn can actually learn things from you. So depending on how you behave in combat, your pawn will pick up on that. There's an entire system about teaching your pawn how to solve quests, basically, as they accompany you on these things. And then, if you're playing in online mode, other players can actually recruit your pawn, and vice versa, and these pawns that you are playing with that way can actually give you some of the solutions or hints to quests you might be stuck on, because they've already been with a character that knows how to complete it, which overall was just a really cool mechanic. And despite some pretty glaring issues, Dragon's Dogma, I think, really shines in spite of those things, which, like a lot of people, makes me hope they eventually decide to do more with that IP. But there you go, everyone. Those are the 5 reviews or games that I have enjoyed the most so far this year. By all means, let me know which ones you liked the most down in the comments section below, or let me know what games that are still releasing this year that you're looking forward to. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. We're growing every day, and that I could not do without you. So, thank you again. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.